Alright, so it's reading some voltage and it should change when I touch it. So it looks good. It looks like it's calibrated. Or sorry, it's circuit's working. Alright, so that's your voltage. Then you're gonna multiply that voltage by whatever your sensitivity was. What was the sensitivity that anyone got?
I got -60.
-60. That's probably right. -60. So we'll have the force over here, and there's a huge offset. It's sitting at -60 newtons, and when I push down on it, well, it's going the wrong way, so I guess it's a positive 60. Alright, so now we're at positive 60, and when I push down on it, it goes down like, I don't think I'm that strong, but whatever. Yeah, okay, so it goes down a bit, and it goes up. So there's this big offset right here, so we have to subtract it. Now the easiest thing to do, which you all are probably aware, is I would just look at this and see it's about 55.5, and I would subtract that. So I take this signal, and subtract 55.5. I mean, obviously you're going to use real data that you'll figure out. Subtract that, and I should get about 0 if everything's done properly. And that's close enough. So when I push down on it, it'll go to -50 or so, and I push up on it, it'll go to -20 or 30. I have no idea if that calibration is right. I didn't do the calibration, but you will. At this point, the voltage doesn't really matter much. The only thing that's important with the voltage is if we get close to the saturation rails. So we could just run some simple comparisons. If the voltage is greater than, so this is a waveform. It has like 100 samples in it, and I think if I try to plug this array into the waveform, it's going to give me 100 different values. There's a few things we could do. Since we want to know the greatest value, I think there's a function called max and min.
Oh, yes.
No, that's for two numbers.
Array.
So I think if I stick an array in here,
Whatever reading it's doing.
actually I don't want to do that. I'm going to get rid of that. Let's just check if it's greater than. So if this waveform is greater than, not 4 volts, because 4 volts is when it is saturating. So let's say like 3.75 volts, assuming it doesn't saturate. We don't want to have an error. And if the voltage is less than, now not 50 millivolts, so how about 250 millivolts, we'll want an error. And now this is going to return an array. Create indicator, if I were to do that. You know, I can create an indicator. So what we want to do is for array element. So if any of these are true, we're going to want to make, does that not work for an array?
It's probably just taking the last value instead of,
It's possible.
because the chart's just printing the last value.
Yeah, but I thought it was measuring a couple hundred values. So it's reading 100 samples.
You want to see what I do?
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
checking.
back in the log. That's yours right there, 50. I'll point it out.
let me try this, so that was less than. It seems to be doing the OR math already, that's interesting. Okay. Well, then I guess this works. It might be the last value. So if it's too high, we'll say, decrease voltage. And if it's too low, you could do increase voltage.
Are we trying to have the light come on if it's ever gone out of?
Yeah, if it's getting
Rail
close to the
or-
range, so I think if I push down really hard, we'll get to the negative saturation level. So you see right here, you see how it bottoms out? Well, I could detect that. You could name that something better, but now it's checking if we're too low. It tells me I've got saturation error. You see the line flatlining when I push down? We're in saturation error. And we could plot, if you wanted to plot this, you
when you
can see
do
it saturating. I kinda just deleted the plot, but let's leave it up there. Alright, so there's the voltage right here. So you'll see when I push down on it too hard, it'll saturate at the 0 limit, right? It saturates, and my errors notice the voltage dip below 0.25. Now if I go slowly,
Oh.
you'll see the voltage light will come on the second I go under 0.25, even though we're not saturating. We're just getting close. It's kind of nice to know that you're getting close, and you might want to make an adjustment. And the same would happen if we went all the way up, which I don't want to mess with the churn pot because this was someone else's hardware. But the same thing would happen if the voltage got too high. We have a warning to feed back to the operator that something's gone wrong and the measurement's invalid. Alright, so let's get that out of the way. So let's get rid of this too. I don't even want to see that plot over again. Now we just have the force plot. So let's create some space over here. Alright, so you've got your sensitivity, might as well label it as such. This will be a constant. So we could do visible items, label, sensitivity. And this is in what, newtons per volt?
Yeah.
Yeah, so input's volt, the output's newtons, right? If you calculate it correctly. And this is our offset here. So you can see things have shifted already, right? So since whatever I've been messing around with, it's not at 0 anymore. Now it's at 1.9 or whatever. Now what I have to do, if I were to create an indicator here, so let's do numeric indicator. This will be force before offset. This is just a temporary variable that we're going to look at. So here's the force before we apply the offset here. And I'm going to actually put this down here because I know it's nice. This wire. So here's our force before the offset. Alright, so what I would do to recalibrate is I go, okay, well, it's not 55.5, you see now it's 53.4 for whatever reason. So I would stop this, and I would change this to 53.4. And now it's back at 0, assuming I did it right. Or 53.6, whatever, it's moving around all over the place. And I can keep doing that and stopping the GUI and redoing it, which is a terrible user interface. If someone like made you open up the software of your scale and like use a USB file to upload a new parameter every time to use it, that would be a horrible user interface. So we need to do this, what I just did programmatically. So instead of stopping the code, going here, going 53.8, and then restarting the code, I just want a button to zero this out. So we could create a Boolean button, a push button here, called zero force. Now, we haven't played much with buttons yet. I mean, I push your buttons all the time. Good joke. No. So there's different ways to operate a button. So when we run this thing, the standard way to operate a button is every time you click it, it switches. And if I click it again, it switches. Some of you probably like at some point in time got your stop button all messed up, and you click stop and then you start your GUI and then it stops right away because the stop stays engaged. This stop button is different. When I click on it, it just stays active for one time. So that's in the mechanical action. So in mechanical action, you could have it switch when pressed, you could have it switch when released, you could have it switch until release, so it'll be true until you let go. And then a lot of the times, the nice ones are latch. So what latch does is every time you press it, it'll change value, so from false to true, until the next time the blocks diagram calls it, it'll be true, and it'll go back to false. That's what the stop button's doing. The stop button's also latch. So if I were to look over here at the mechanical action, it latches when released. So when you release the stop button, it goes from false to true, it stops your code, and then it goes back to true to false without you having to click it again. If you've ever created a stop button that was the toggle version, it messes with you. And it's like if we change this mechanical action to switch when released, then what happens is I run my code and I stop it, and then I run my code again and it stops right away, and you go, hey, why isn't this working? My code never works. How many people have had that problem? It's happened to a few of you. So you want to go to the mechanical action, and then switch back, mechanical action, latch and release. So that way it just goes true for the instant that you hit it, and then it goes back. So that's what we want here on 0. Mechanical action, latch and release. I like latch and release because it gives you a chance to second guess yourself. So if I go down here and I hold down the stop and I go, nah, never mind, and I move my cursor off the stop button and then release, nothing happens. So I like that function where it latches and it only if you let go of it on top of it. So now we've got a 0 force. So what we can do is we've got this force. We don't really care about this because we're not going to read it anymore. We are going to want to turn it into a number because this is not going to work right. So array, I think it's under numeric, double, what was the last value? Let me try to remember that. I think that's right. All right, so shift registers is what you want here. So whatever that last value is, we're going to want to replace with a shift register so it comes back here. Right? So if we were to just do this and connect it, what it's going to do is it's going to take the last value and replace it, and it's going to zero out by itself. The problem is it's always subtracting the last value. So if I push down on it, it'll go to 0 again. If I let go of it, it'll go back to 0. It's constantly zeroing every single time. It's just going to 0 over and over again, no matter what load it is. Like I'll put a fixed load on it, and it'll go back to 0 again. I don't have that much fun there. Yeah. So we want to do it only when we hit the 0 button, not every single time. So this little switcheroony right here, where we replace the last value with the current value, should happen in a case structure. Structure, case structure. I'm gonna put it right here. And I'm gonna have to run this wire through that case structure. Right now it's going behind the case structure, unfortunately. This is gonna go in here. And I want that to come out up here and be that value. In fact, we're always, no, this is good. Sorry, actually it was fine the way I drew it the first time. The last value is what should be subtracted always. We're just gonna go over here. So when we hit the 0 force button, we're gonna replace this shift register line with the current value. And then in the false case, we're just gonna take the old value and feed that through. So let me clean this up a little bit. No, don't like that. Let me clean up this. And over. This.
How did you get the?
What?
How did he get the DB out?
Alright, so check it out. When you don't push anything, it's just gonna keep
I have to
whatever
see
the
the
old
video.
value is. And
I
whenever
can
you
upload
push
it.
the button, it's gonna replace the
Upload
old
the video.
value with the current value, and that'll give you the function that you wanna get. So, make sure we have a mechanical action. Use latch when released, because if it was switch when released, it'd be the same thing. Just every time I hit it, it would always be 0, and when I push on it, it will stay 0 again. So we gotta make sure that this is latched. So let's switch that mechanical action back to latch when released. And now, whatever the value is, it's starting at 50, I'm gonna push 0, and it's gonna set one time, it's gonna go down to 0, and it's gonna fix that offset in place, so when I push on it, it'll be the change of 0. And if like 30 minutes go on and you drift off to a new value, you just 0 it again. And that's how you 0.
Interesting.
Yeah. That just converts the waveform to a double, which is the orange wire. I think it converts a double. Yeah.